The Nintendo Switch originally released March 2017 and took the world by storm, forming a new era of portable gaming. To get full-blown home console-level games on the go to this extent could barely be imagined only years prior, and now it's 2024, and the Switch is turning 7 years old, still Nintendo's flagship console. Is it still worth buying? And which model is best for you? Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and as of making this video, no Nintendo Switch successor, typically referred to as the Switch 2 in rumors, has officially been announced. There is, however, an unending amount of speculation, and no matter which way we try to spin it, the fact is the current Switch is essentially a 2017 tablet trying to survive with a current generation of gaming that vastly surpasses it in performance. While there still are absolutely amazing recent releases for the Switch, such as 2023's Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Wonder, we've also seen the limits of the console stretch as far as they can go, meaning it's inevitable for a Switch 2 release to be on the horizon. The problem here is that Nintendo has stayed silent on when this could actually happen, putting consumers in a rough spot. If you don't have a Nintendo Switch yet and want one, or perhaps do or did have one but it's got a poor battery or is giving other issues, you may be pretty lost on what to do. Either buy a Switch now or wait until the next model releases. And there's no easy answer here. If we knew when that release would happen, it would definitely simplify things, but we just don't. For the sake of keeping this review straightforward, we're going to keep Switch 2 rumor talk to a minimum. Ultimately, it's all speculation, so even if we do discuss it in length, there's a very good chance it could all end up being wrong anyways. People were convinced a new Switch was coming soon, but 2023 came and went with nothing, so now some rumors are still clinging to an early 2024 release date, which is extremely unlikely, but the majority seem to be vying for a launch in the latter half of 2024, likely somewhere between September and November. The Switch has sold well over 130 million units, making it one of the best-selling consoles of all time, so there's no question that Nintendo is going to be amping up for a successor. The when, however, we just don't know. So should you wait, or should you just get a Switch now? The Nintendo Switch, as it stands in 2024, has, in a certain sense, never represented better value. Not only do we see occasional sales on the hardware, albeit Nintendo's games themselves barely ever see price reductions, but the catalog and backlog of amazing games for the Switch is overwhelming. From both Zelda titles to many Mario games to everything else we've seen come the past 7 years, even if a Switch 2 were to release tomorrow, there's no shortage of content for you to enjoy on this 2017 machine. It's for that reason that I do think it's still worth buying a Switch in 2024, regardless of rumors and speculation, because the games are a blast and worth playing regardless. The portability is still fantastic, and while battery life on consoles used for so many hours over the past years may not be holding up great, especially if you have one of those original model Switches, this doesn't apply to those who still have not jumped on the bandwagon. Now, if you do already have a Switch, perhaps a family Switch, and you want to get your own, or you have the original model and it's just struggling, I do heavily recommend sticking it out and waiting for the Switch 2. While your experience might not be ideal anymore, the next Switch is going to be a much better investment overall and has a very high probability of being backwards compatible, meaning your current Switch library should be playable on the new machine. So in short, if you don't have a Switch yet, I do think it's worth getting in 2024. If you do have one but are anxious for an upgrade, I wouldn't buy one yet. Wait until the Switch 2, I don't think you'll regret it. And so with that out of the way, we can break down some of the specifics for the console. I'm going to cover all 3 Switch models here, but I'm also going to link to a separate video for the Switch Lite in the description, as it's quite a bit different from the other 2. Still, we will go ahead and break down the major differences in the 3 models, starting with that cheaper option. At $200 US, you've got the Nintendo Switch Lite that came out in 2019. It has the Joy-Cons built into the device itself, and is probably the most comfortable experience to play portably, albeit the display is not as nice as the OLED model for sure, and the whole thing is a bit smaller if that's a concern. Battery life is also a bit worse, running 3 to 7 hours versus 4.5 to 9 hours on the more expensive options. Even so, it's a great little machine, and I think it's perfect for those wanting something to tide themselves over until the Switch 2, with one specific caveat: there's no TV functionality whatsoever. This means the Lite is permanently portable. It is still an amazing console that provides a great gameplay experience, but it's not going to be for everyone. It's also probably best for an individual rather than a shared console. It does, however, make for a great secondary Switch. If you already have had a Switch in the past but maybe have had a bad battery, or just want something for yourself, this is the system to get, assuming you're not willing to wait for the Switch 2. It's cheaper than the others by a good margin, and it makes a lot of sense for individual usage. And if you have Nintendo Online, you also have cloud saves, making it easy and quick to transfer saves from your Switch Lite to and from your other Switch, which say you have hooked up to the TV. The Switch Lite is definitely worth buying for the right person. And again, if you want more details, I'll have a dedicated review linked in the description. But still, having no TV functionality does remove so much versatility from the Switch, and really what made the console so interesting in the first place, the actual, switching. This brings us to the next 2 models. models, the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch OLED, which go for $300 and $350 respectively. The differences are pretty straightforward. The OLED model came out in 2021 and has a larger OLED screen that displays significantly more vibrant, robust colors and really improves the overall portable experience. I said the Switch Lite was probably the most comfortable portable experience, but the OLED really takes the cake overall with just how great this screen looks. The resolution is still the same as the other models at 720p, but at this size it looks pretty good, and I can't emphasize just how much better these colors look. With true blacks to boot, as OLED is able to turn off individual pixels, versus how an LCD screen, even when displaying the color black, still needs the entire screen, the backlight, lit up, making it more of a gray than a black, really. For $50 extra, I do think the OLED model is more than worth going for compared to the original Switch. The bezels are thinner, the dock's a bit nicer, and it just feels like a more sleek, modern experience overall. It's an in-between device to help tide us over to the Switch 2, and it really does feel like an upgrade over the original, albeit only in the display. Everything else about these consoles is basically the same otherwise. Same hardware, same graphics, same games, same battery life, and so on. This isn't a 3DS versus new 3DS type situation. If you just don't care about the colors, or plan to mainly play on the TV, I don't think there's any harm in saving $50 and buying the lower model. However, it is worth noting that the OLED model also has double the amount of internal storage and 64GB versus only 32 on the LCD version. While this doesn't matter that much with microSD cards being incredibly cheap, and you definitely should buy one if you're going to be downloading any games, 64 gigs does add a bit more bang for your buck when it comes to the 2021 OLED model. As for the original Switch model, calling it the original is actually a little bit deceptive, as it's technically an updated variation that came out in 2019. You can tell the difference from the model numbers or just from the box, as it came in a red box versus a white box for the 2017 Switch. Battery life was majorly improved on the newer Switch, and it overall was a nice little upgrade for no extra cost to new buyers. But I mention this specifically due to homebrewing and hacking. If you're someone who enjoys jailbreaking and messing around with their devices, you're gonna want to get one of those original white box models, as they're unbelievably easy to hack, and you can basically do anything with them, whereas all the other models are very locked down and have no simple methods of cracking. Obviously, do any of this at your own risk, but if it's something you're interested in, there's plenty of old Switches on the used market, although prices can be a bit inflated due to the demand. But yeah, that's the basic rundown of the current Switch models. $200 Switch Lite, $300 red box Switch from 2019, and then the $350 OLED Switch. It wouldn't surprise me if when the Switch 2 comes out, Nintendo actually continues selling one of or even multiple of these consoles. The Switch Lite in particular I could see sticking around even at its current price tag, as it's solid value already and has essentially replaced the Nintendo 3DS as their low-end portable console offering. So with these models in mind, let's consider the other aspects of the Switch and how it stands in 2024. Firstly, competition. Does the Switch have competition? In 2017, it really didn't. The only competition for it was probably Nintendo's own DS or 3DS. These days, it's a little bit more complicated. Portable PCs like the Steam Deck or Asus ROG Ally and all these things, some may not consider these genuine competitors, but they sort of are if you're into PC gaming, and they can produce, of course, much better graphics and performance overall. You're just trading it off for the ease of use and, of course, Nintendo titles. There's also the PlayStation Portal, but don't get too excited. It's just a streaming device for your PS5 that you need to already own, so I would buy a Switch any day of the week over a Portal personally. One thing to note for the Switch is Nintendo Online, which may be an added cost that you're going to want to account for. You need it to play games online, and luckily it starts at only $20 a year, much cheaper than PlayStation Plus or Xbox Live subscriptions. There is, however, a second tier at a more typical price of $50 a year, as well as family plans if you want to share a subscription across multiple Switches and Nintendo accounts. The $20 plan grants you online play, cloud saves, and a large selection of classic Nintendo titles from the NES, SNES, and Game Boy. The expansion pack grants you all of the above, along with some more classic games from the N64, Game Boy Advanced, and Sega Genesis, and then it also gives some more exclusive content for Mario Kart and a couple others. I think for the vast majority of people, unless you're really interested in any of that or a big Mario Kart fan, the base subscription is probably the way to go, but at least you have options either way. So that's Nintendo Online, but what about the Switch hardware itself? There's a lot to potentially consider. The Joy-Con controllers are infamous for getting stick drift and becoming even unusable seemingly at random, and unfortunately Nintendo has never properly addressed this or fixed it even to this day. It's really bad, but they do have a repair program that could be worth looking into if you're suffering from the issue. You'll be able to tell you have drift when your character on the screen is moving a different way than you're actually trying to move it with your joystick. You can help hopefully keep this to a minimum by taking good care of your controllers, not eating with them, or anything like that, but it does still happen at random, and my own Switch OLED controllers got stick drift after not even a year of light usage. I honestly barely played with them before they started drifting. It's just ridiculous. And these things are not cheap cheap to replace either. Now, Nintendo's repair program should fix these for free, but you have to ship them away, and it's a lot of trouble to go to. Still, Joy-Cons as a whole are pretty awesome, with the easy sliding on and off of the system, the included bumpers and wrist strap, and the ability to make each Joy-Con an individual controller for multiplayer games. And that's where, to me, the Switch has always been at its best, the multiplayer experience. Not online, mind you. That's actually always been a bit of a mess from a lot of games, but the local multiplayer and couch co-op, where you can lay back and play some Mario Kart or Smash Brothers with friends in person, or any number of other titles. While the PS5 and Xbox do have some couch co-op games here and there, Nintendo puts them all to shame, and if you want a console to play in person with friends or family, the Switch is just the obvious choice. If you're not a Joy-Con guy, there's also a lot of other options for controllers, and I do recommend the Switch Pro controller. It's actually great, with amazing battery life, and I personally feel like it's a better fit for traditionally controlled games like Tears of the Kingdom or even Skyrim. And I do love having the option to switch back and forth, whether in handheld mode or watching on my TV. The versatility here is so unique, and man, I would have been blown away as a kid to be able to play some of these games of such high caliber on the go. Like, it is really crazy what we have here, even if the Switch is quite old at this point. And it really is the games that make the Switch such a great system even after 7 years. There are so many quality titles to choose from, with again, just such a massive backlog at this point. I'm not gonna bother running through them. A quick Google search will tell you all you need to know. This game library is absolutely stacked, and many of the best games are from Nintendo themselves, which means you probably can't play them anywhere else, unless you use a Switch emulator on your PC, but you did not hear that from me. Even so, as with any other console, there are going to be some sore spots with games, some games in particular, and the Switch probably has more than typical due to its biggest bottleneck and the reason why people are so anxious for its successor, performance. Ultimately, this is a 2017 tablet that could probably be beat by an iPhone 7 in terms of power. And while it's absolutely astonishing how much great gaming has been cranked out of this thing, with some really gorgeous titles with robust physics like Tears of the Kingdom, for every masterpiece there's 2 or 3 lazily thrown together ports done solely as a cash grab. There are too many games for the Switch that have launched with practically unplayable performance, and many of them never really improve much from that initial state. Typically, patches do make them better over time, but a lot of it is inexcusable. A great example of this is the Batman Arkham trilogy, and I highly recommend watching Digital Foundry's video on it for details. So basically, while the first 2 games were ported from the Xbox 360 and PS3 era and perform okay enough, the third Arkham game that came from PS4 and Xbox One is essentially an unplayable mess. Updates may partly fix things, but it's a bad port and never should have released in the first place. It's just atrocious and an embarrassment to this trilogy of some really great games. While this is a particularly egregious example, these sort of launches have been a running trend for the Switch from day one, as it just doesn't have anywhere near the amount of power other modern consoles do, making it at times a fool's errand for companies to try and release their games to a Nintendo audience, as well as the other systems. This is a huge reason why a Switch 2 has been so desperately needed for years now, and hopefully when it does come out, it'll give enough leeway with power for this to be a less common issue moving forward. Still, any portable system is not going to match the beastly large PS5 or any other competition like it. It's portable, so there are going to be limitations. If you're someone who cares about graphical fidelity, or even just want your games to be running at 60 FPS, or sometimes even just a stable 30, the Switch probably isn't for you. Now, that being said, there are a lot of games that do take full advantage of the Switch's hardware and manage to push a breathtaking experience. The new Super Mario RPG remaster looks amazing, for example. It's those games that are best experienced on Switch. Another recent one that isn't from Nintendo that blew me away was the Persona 5 Royal Port, which not only performs fantastically on Switch, but might actually be the best way to experience the 120-hour JRPG. It's really long, but you can take it with you. This visual style isn't the most graphically demanding, and that's perfect for the Switch. Just watch me as I walk down the street here. And now compare that to this, PS5 gameplay. While there's definitely a big jump in resolution as we switch back and forth, as well as frame rate from 30 FPS to 60 FPS, until you saw the PS5 version, the Switch one probably looked pretty good. Even now, if you're watching on a smaller display like a phone, you may not see that drastic an improvement between the two side by side. While I do love games like this playing at a smooth 4K at 60 FPS, being able to play some games portably can absolutely make the drawbacks worth it. So it's important that before you buy any game for the Switch, look up reviews and specifically look up how the game performs on the Switch itself. Some games like this translate incredibly well, but then some just really don't. Technical limitations aren't going away, so it's worth doing some research to make sure you don't end up spending $60 on something like the Batman Arkham trilogy. Some game ports also perform okay. Hogwarts Legacy is a fantastic game, and one that never should have been able to run on the Switch, and yet it does. Watching gameplay, you can pretty clearly see how many major concessions had to be made to make it happen. It's not going to bother everyone, but it's still worth mentioning. It's definitely the biggest issue with what is otherwise one of the greatest gaming consoles to ever hit store shelves without a doubt. And so at this point, we've covered the Switch 2 rumors pointing to a latter half 2024 release, the 3 models of Switch available, and the overall 2024 experience with the hardware and game library. Whether or not the Switch is truly worth it can only be answered by one person, and that's you. Because it's gonna differ for every individual, right? Still, I wouldn't feel too bad buying a Switch right now if you don't want to wait for the next generation. There's so many great games to be played and times to be had, and Nintendo did truly make something special here all those years ago. It's been a long ride, and I'm happy to say that the Switch has managed to hold its own over the years as a truly amazing video game system, and one that I think every household should ultimately have. And so with that, I think I'm right about done here. Do you have a Nintendo Switch? Are you waiting for the Switch 2? What's your favorite Switch game, especially now that we've had 7 years of classic after classic? It's gotta be Tears of the Kingdom for me. Breath of the Wild I really like too, but Tears, I don't know, man. It was just a great game. Make sure you leave a comment down below, and if you found this video helpful or interesting, please hit that like button. It helps out so much. Thank you so much for watching, and again, I will link my other relevant reviews, like on the Switch Lite, in the description. But for now, I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.